I'm Opal, 67 years old, and for 3 generations, my family's farm in rural Montana has been our pride and joy. The land my grandparents cultivated became my sanctuary, my livelihood, my everything. Never did I imagine that during my greatest vulnerability, my own son would betray me so deeply. When I returned home from spinal surgery, to find strangers on my property, my world collapsed. Thanks to your farm, my wife will get to know the Bahamas, my son said, with a smirk. I laughed and asked, "What's so funny?" Let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you want to hear how I fought back when my son stole my legacy. The morning dew on fresh hay has a particular smell that city folks just don't understand. That earthy aroma of possibility, of growth, of life itself. I'd breathe it in every morning at 5 a.m. sharp, just like my grandfather taught me to do. The McIntyre Farm, 85 acres of Montana's finest soil, had been my playground, my classroom, and eventually, my life's purpose. My grandparents purchased this land back in 1938, turning wilderness into a thriving apple orchard with their bare hands. I spent my childhood summers running between apple trees, helping my grandmother can vegetables from our garden, and learning to respect the rhythm of the seasons. When they passed, they left the farm to my parents, who expanded it to include dairy cows and chickens. And when my parents grew too old to manage it all, my husband Thomas and I took over adding organic certification in a small lavender field that became my special project. Thomas passed away 8 years ago. Pancreatic cancer took him so fast, I barely had time to process it. The farm became my lifeline after that, the physical labor a welcome distraction from grief. Every blister, every aching muscle felt like a connection to him, to my parents, to my grandparents. Their spirits lived in the soil. My daily routine never varied much. Up before dawn to feed the animals. Coffee on the porch, watching the sunrise, paint the mountains. Tending to whatever the season demanded. Harvesting apples, in fall planting in spring. Irrigating during summer, and repairs in winter. It was hard work for a woman in her 60s. But fulfilling in ways I can't properly explain. I became something of a fixture at the Riverside Farmers Market every Saturday, known for my heirloom apple varieties and handmade lavender products. Started a small program teaching local kids about sustainable agriculture, too. The farm wasn't just a business, it was a community cornerstone. A real estate agent once told me the property was worth about $1.2 million. Probably more now with property values going up. But how do you put a price tag on your family's legacy? On the oak tree, where my father carved my initials when I was 10. On the kitchen, where 4 generations of women had preserved summer's bounty. You can't. Some things truly are priceless. My son Jackson never quite shared my passion for farming. Even as a child, he was more interested in technology than tractors. He moved to Billings after college, worked his way up at a software company, and visited a few times a year, usually on holidays. I understood. Farm life isn't for everyone, and I was proud of him forging his own path. When he met Natalie 5 years ago, I was thrilled. She seemed bright, ambitious, and brought out a softer side in my somewhat serious son. The wedding was small, but lovely, right here on the farm last spring. I remember Natalie commenting on how beautiful the property was, how peaceful compared to city life. I took it as genuine appreciation, not calculating assessment. That was my first mistake. After the wedding, I noticed Jackson and Natalie visiting more frequently. At first, I was simply happy to see more of them. Then, I started noticing the questions. How much were property taxes? Was the farm profitable? Had I considered what would happen to the property as I got older? I answered honestly, thinking it was just practical conversation. That was my second mistake. Around that time, my back problems began. Years of farm labor had taken their toll on my spine. Some mornings, I could barely get out of bed. I'd push through the pain, take more breaks than I used to, and hire local teenagers for the heaviest work. I was managing, but only just. I didn't let on to Jackson how bad it had gotten. Didn't want him worrying. That was my third mistake. Looking back, I can see how vulnerable I was becoming, how the stage was being set for what would happen next. But hindsight, as they say, is 20/20. In the moment, I was simply a stubborn farmer, fighting through pain to preserve her family's legacy, completely unaware that the real threat wasn't my failing body, but the slow calculation happening in my own family. The morning I couldn't get out of bed at all should have been my wake-up call. The pain shot through my lower back like lightning, radiating down both legs. I managed to reach my phone and call my neighbor Earl, who drove me to the emergency room in Billings. The doctor's face told me everything I needed to know before he even spoke. "Mrs. McIntyre, you have severe spinal stenosis with compression of the nerve roots. In layman's terms, your spine is pressing on the nerves that control your legs. You need surgery, and soon, or you risk permanent damage." I argued, of course, asked if physical therapy might help, or pain management, anything to avoid surgery and the recovery time it would require. But the MRI results were clear. This wasn't something I could push through with determination and ibuprofen. "Who will take care of my farm?" I asked, not really expecting an answer. The surgery would require at least 3 weeks in the hospital and rehabilitation center, followed by months of limited physical activity. No lifting, no bending, no farm work. The thought terrified me more than the surgery itself. I called Jackson that evening, explained the situation as calmly as I could, though inside I was panicking. To my surprise, he and Natalie immediately offered to oversee the farm during my recovery. "Don't worry about a thing, Mom," Jackson said. "We've been wanting to spend more time away from the city anyway. Natalie can work remotely, and I've got plenty of vacation time saved up." Relief washed over me. "It would just be for a few weeks. I've got Theo and Marta coming in to handle the daily chores. You just need to supervise and make decisions if anything unexpected comes up." "We've got this," Natalie assured me. "You just focus on getting better." In the week before my surgery, I went into planning overdrive, created detailed instructions for every aspect of farm operations, organized my finances, making sure bills were set up for automatic payment, called my attorney, Franklin Wibber, to draw up a limited power of attorney, giving Jackson authority to handle farm operations and emergency financial decisions related to the farm during my recovery. This is specifically limited to maintaining the farm in my absence, I emphasized as we reviewed the document. It doesn't authorize any major changes or sales. "That's correct, Mrs. McIntyre," Franklin confirmed. "This is purely for operational continuity and emergencies. Jackson won't be able to sell or make substantial changes to the property with this document." I signed the papers, filed copies in my home office, and gave the originals to Jackson. I remember his expression as I handed them over, a flicker of something I couldn't quite place: interest, excitement. I dismissed it as my imagination. The day before admission, I walked my property one last time, ran my hands over the rough bark of apple trees planted before I was born, breathed in the scent of lavender from my field, sat in Thomas's old rocking chair on the porch, and watched the sunset paint the mountains gold. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered promises to return soon. The surgery itself went well, but complications developed afterward. An infection extended my hospital stay to 2 weeks instead of 1. Physical therapy was more challenging than expected. 3 weeks turned into nearly 5 before the doctors were satisfied with my progress. During this time, communication with Jackson was spotty. He'd call every few days with brief updates, always sounding rushed. "Everything's fine, Mom. Focus on getting better." When I'd ask specific questions about the animals or the orchard, he'd give vague answers or change the subject. In my medicated state, I didn't push as hard as I should have. The nursing staff at the rehabilitation center became like family, especially Amanda, a night nurse with a gentle manner and surprising knowledge of farming. She'd grown up on a cattle ranch and understood my anxiety about being away from the land. "Something doesn't feel right," I confided to her one night after a particularly unsettling call with Jackson. He'd mentioned making some changes to make the farm more manageable for me upon my return. "You're the boss, Opal," Amanda reminded me. "Any changes are yours to make when you get home." I nodded, but the unease lingered. If only I'd listened to my instincts demanded more information or asked Franklin to check on things. Instead, I focused on my exercises, determined to get strong enough to return home as quickly as possible. By the time I was ready to leave, that urgency had become almost unbearable. I was scheduled for another week of rehabilitation, but after a good evaluation from the physical therapist, I convinced them to discharge me early. I wanted to surprise Jackson with my return, show him how well I was recovering. That was my plan when I took a taxi from the rehabilitation center, my small suitcase filled with hospital belongings, heart full of gratitude for my son's help during this difficult time. The taxi turned onto the long driveway of McIntyre Farm, and immediately I knew something was wrong. A new sign hung at the entrance: Peterson Family Farms. My heart began racing. Had Jackson leased the land while I was gone? Was this some sort of temporary arrangement? As we approached the farmhouse, I saw unfamiliar vehicles parked out front. Children's toys scattered across the lawn I'd maintained so meticulously. The driver gave me a concerned look as I sat frozen in the back seat. "Is this the right address, ma'am?" I nodded mutely, paid the fare, and slowly got out, leaning heavily on my walker. A woman about my son's age emerged from my front door, looking confused by my presence. "Can I help you?" she asked, not unkindly. "This is my farm," I said, my voice sounding distant, even to my own ears. "I'm Opal McIntyre." Her expression shifted to one of pity mixed with discomfort. "Oh, you're Jackson's mother. I'm Sarah Peterson. My husband and I purchased this property 3 weeks ago. We were told you were moving to assisted living." The ground seemed to tilt beneath me. Purchased 3 weeks ago, Jackson had sold my farm while I was in the hospital. There must be a mistake. I managed gripping my walker tighter. I never authorized any sale. This farm has been in my family for generations. Sarah called her husband Mark, who emerged from the barn, my barn wiping his hands on a rag. After awkward introductions, he invited me inside, into my own home to sit down. The furniture was different. My things were gone. Family photos, heirlooms, all replaced by a stranger's belongings. "We purchased the property legally, Mrs. McIntyre," Mark explained, showing me the deed transfer documentation on his phone. "Your son had power of attorney. Everything was handled properly through River Valley Real Estate." "For how much?" I asked, voice trembling. Mark hesitated. $850,000, nearly $400,000 below market value. I felt physically ill. Where is Jackson now? They gave me his new address, an upscale apartment complex in downtown Billings. Before I left, Sarah insisted on packing me a sandwich and water bottle for the journey. Such kindness from the woman living in my stolen home made the situation even more surreal. Another taxi ride, this one a blur of shock and growing rage. Jackson's apartment building had a doorman, a fountain in the lobby. Luxury that my farm had paid for. The elevator ride to the 12th floor gave me time to compose myself, to push down the screaming in my head so I could face my son with dignity. Jackson opened the door, surprise and alarm crossing his face immediately. "Mom, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be in rehab for another week." I pushed past him into an expansive apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Natalie was lounging on a white leather sofa, scrolling through her phone. She looked up annoyed at the interruption, rather than shocked by my appearance. "I just came from the farm," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Except it's not our farm anymore, is it? It's the Peterson farm now." Jackson had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Mom, I can explain. You need to sit down." "I'm fine standing," I lied, pain shooting through my back, but pride keeping me upright. "The farm was too much for you," he began. "You nearly crippled yourself trying to maintain it. After your surgery, we realized you wouldn't be able to keep up with it anymore. The doctor said you'd need to significantly change your lifestyle. So you sold my home without consulting me, using a power of attorney meant only for emergency management." "It was an emergency," Natalie interjected, putting down her phone. "You were in denial about your limitations. Jackson did what was necessary." "Necessary?" I echoed. "Selling my family's legacy for almost half of its value was necessary. We got a fair price given the urgency," Jackson defended. "And now, you don't have to worry about maintaining that enormous property. We're looking at some really nice senior communities for you." I stared at my son, this stranger, who thought he knew what was best for my life. "Where's the money, Jackson? The $850,000. He and Natalie exchanged glances. "Well, we've set aside $200,000 for your future housing and care," he began. "And the rest?" I demanded. He had the audacity to smile, then a smug expression I'd never seen on my son's face before. "Thanks to your farm, my wife will get to know the Bahamas. We leave next week for our delayed honeymoon. First class all the way." I laughed a hollow sound that surprised even me. "What's so funny?" I asked. Jackson's smile faltered. "I don't understand. What's funny is that you think this is over, that you can sell my farm without permission, take my money, and I'll just accept it." Natalie rolled her eyes. "You should be grateful. We're taking care of your future. And frankly, you weren't taking care of that farm properly anyway. It was falling apart." I looked around the luxury apartment, noticed the shopping bags from high-end stores, the new watches on both their wrists. This was what my legacy had purchased. Not security for me, but luxury for them. "Where are my things?" I asked, suddenly realizing all my personal possessions were also gone. "In storage," Jackson said quickly. "We kept everything important." "And who decided what was important?" "You." The conversation deteriorated from there. Jackson oscillating between defensive justification and patronizing concern about my mental state. Natalie barely concealing her contempt. Me trying to understand how my son could have become this person I didn't recognize. I left without resolution, descending to the lobby in a daze. Made it to a coffee shop across the street before the tears came great, heaving sobs that alarmed the other customers. The barista brought me water and tissues, asked if I needed her to call someone. But there was no one to call. My home was gone. My son had betrayed me. I was 77 years old and suddenly homeless. The Red Pine Motel charged by the week. Room 6 became my temporary home. Its faded wallpaper and lumpy mattress, a far cry from the farmhouse I'd lovingly maintained for decades. I had my purse, the small suitcase of clothes from the hospital, and nothing else. Everything I owned, everything I cherished, was either with strangers or in some storage unit I didn't have access to. The physical pain from surgery seemed almost secondary now to the emotional wound. Every morning I'd wake, forgetting for a blissful moment, then reality would crash back. No farm, no home, no son, not really. I'd lost him too, or perhaps never really known him. Sleep came fitfully, punctuated by dreams of the farm, running through the orchard as a child, dancing with Thomas under the stars on our wedding night, teaching Jackson to ride his first bike down the long driveway. Were those memories worth more to me than they were to him? How could we value the same experiences so differently? I was afraid to contact friends. At first, embarrassed by what had happened. What would I say? My son sold my farm while I was in surgery and spent the money on a luxury honeymoon. It sounded ridiculous, even to me. Would they believe me? Would they secretly think Jackson was right about me being unable to care for myself? After 3 days of isolation, I called Barbara, my oldest friend. We'd gone to high school together, shared the ups and downs of marriages, children, grandchildren. If anyone would understand, it would be her. "Opal McIntyre, where on earth have you been?" she demanded when she picked up. "I've been calling the farm for weeks with no answer." The sound of her familiar voice broke something in me. I told her everything, the words tumbling out between sobs. "I'm coming to get you," she said when I finished. "Pack your things. You're staying with me until we figure this out." 2 hours later, I was settled into Barbara's guest room in Billings, surrounded by her colorful quilts and family photos. It was a comfort, but also a painful reminder of everything I'd lost. My own quilts, my own photos, the physical artifacts of my life were gone, and with them, a piece of my identity. "You can stay as long as you need," Barbara assured me, setting a cup of tea on the nightstand. "Martin and I have plenty of room." I was grateful, but uncomfortable. Dependence didn't sit well with me after a lifetime of self-sufficiency. In my darkest moments, that first week, I wondered if Jackson was right. Maybe I was too old, too broken to live independently. Maybe I should be grateful for the $200,000 in whatever senior living facility he deemed appropriate. Those thoughts usually came at night. In the daylight, anger burned brighter than doubt. Jackson's text messages didn't help. "Just checking on you," he'd write, as if he hadn't upended my entire existence. "Found a great place for seniors near us. Pools, activities, the works." No acknowledgement of what he'd done. No real apology. Meanwhile, Natalie posted honeymoon preparation photos on social media. New luggage, designer resort wear, a diamond bracelet that surely cost thousands. "Pre-honeymoon shopping spree," the caption read. "Can't wait for Bahamas luxury. My money, my farm, my legacy funding their extravagance while I slept in a friend's spare room." "You need to fight back," Barbara said one morning over breakfast, sliding her tablet across the table. On screen was a listing for McIntyre Farm, now Peterson Farm, with plans for expanding the orchard and adding a corn maze attraction. "That's your home, Opal. Your life's work. You can't just let them take it." She was right. The realization came with a clarity that had been missing in the fog of shock and grief. This wasn't just about a property. It was about justice, about standing up for myself when my own son had decided my voice didn't matter. "I don't even know where to begin," I admitted. "I do," Barbara said, determination in her eyes. "First, we call my niece Sandra. She's a lawyer specializing in elder law. Then we get your things out of storage. And then Opal McIntyre, we go to war." For the first time since seeing that Peterson Family Farms sign, I felt a spark of hope. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't done. Jackson had underestimated me, and that was going to be his biggest mistake of all. Sandra Williams's law office occupied a converted Victorian house in downtown Billings, its interior a blend of historic charm and modern efficiency. The lawyer herself matched her surroundings, silver-streaked, dark hair, twisted into a professional knot, reading glasses dangling from a beaded chain, eyes sharp with intelligence. "Mrs. McIntyre, after reviewing the power of attorney document you signed, I believe we have grounds for legal action," she said, placing the papers on her desk. "This was explicitly a limited power of attorney for farm operations during your medical absence. It did not authorize the sale of property." Hope flickered. "So the sale can be reversed." Sandra's expression turned cautious. "It's complicated. The Petersons purchased the property in good faith. They're innocent third parties in this situation. Reversing the sale would require proving fraud not just on Jackson's part, but collusion by the real estate company and possibly the Petersons themselves, which we can't do," I guessed. "Not based on what you've told me. However, we can definitely pursue Jackson for financial elder abuse, breach of fiduciary duty, and potentially fraud. The court could order him to return the proceeds of the sale to you, most of which he's already spent," I said bitterly. "We'll freeze his accounts immediately to prevent further dissipation of assets," Sandra assured me. "And any major purchases made after the fraudulent sale could potentially be clawed back." We spent the next 2 hours building our case. The limited scope of the power of attorney, my clear mental capacity at the time of signing, the timing of the sale during my medical vulnerability, the grossly under-market value transaction, the rapid spending of proceeds on luxury items rather than my care. "We should also reach out to your doctor and the rehabilitation center," Sandra suggested. "Medical testimony about your condition and capacity will be crucial." I thought immediately of Amanda, the night nurse, who'd listened to my concerns. I know just who to ask. Over the next week, we gathered evidence. Franklin Weber, my attorney, who had drafted the power of attorney, was furious when he learned how it had been misused. He provided a sworn statement about my intentions and Jackson's clear understanding of the document's limitations. Amanda not only agreed to testify, but connected us with the doctor who had performed my surgery. "He was outraged when I told him what happened," she reported. "Said he never told anyone you couldn't return to independent living, just that you needed to modify certain activities." We retrieved my belongings from the storage unit, the key to which Jackson reluctantly provided after Sandra's formal demand. Many items were missing, presumably sold or kept by Jackson and Natalie. Family photos, antique furniture, my grandmother's pearls. Each absent piece was noted and added to our claim. I also reached out to the Petersons, not to blame them, but to explain my situation. Mark was sympathetic but firm. "We sank our life savings into this property, Mrs. McIntyre. We can't just give it back, even if we wanted to." "I understand," I told him, fighting back tears. "I don't blame you. You didn't know." "For what it's worth," Sarah added gently, "we love this farm. We'll take good care of it. Small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. The local farming community rallied around me once word spread. Former employees offered statements about my farm management capabilities. Neighbors provided documentation of my continued active presence at community events and farmers markets right up until my surgery. The narrative Jackson was trying to build of an elderly mother no longer capable of independence crumbled in the face of overwhelming contradictory evidence. As we prepared for court, a piece in the local newspaper highlighted elder financial abuse, using my case as an anonymous example. The reporter Lisa Chen had heard about the situation through the grapevine. "Stories like yours need to be told," she insisted when I agreed to be interviewed. "Too many seniors are vulnerable to exploitation, often by their own family members." The article generated community support, but also pushed Jackson to attempt damage control. He called repeatedly, alternating between placating offers and veiled threats. "Mom, you're making this so much harder than it needs to be," he said during one call. "Why don't we sit down like adults and work this out?" "We'll sit down in court," I replied, Sandra's coaching, giving me confidence I hadn't felt in weeks. My physical recovery continued alongside my legal preparation. The anger, the purpose seemed to accelerate my healing. 6 weeks after surgery, I was walking without assistance, exceeding my doctor's expectations. The night before our court date, I stood in Barbara's backyard, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that reminded me of my farm. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe I might actually win this fight. The Yellowstone County Courthouse, intimidated with its massive stone columns and echoing halls. Sandra guided me through security and into a wood-paneled courtroom where Jackson and Natalie already waited with their attorney, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. Jackson avoided my gaze, but Natalie stared defiantly, as if I were the one who had wronged her. Judge Helen Bowers, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, entered and called the proceedings to order. After preliminary introductions, Jackson's attorney presented their defense, first painting a picture of a concerned son making necessary decisions for an aging mother in denial about her limitations. Mrs. McIntyre's advanced age and medical condition made her unable to maintain the 85-acre working farm, he argued smoothly. Mr. McIntyre, acting out of concern for his mother's well-being and safety, made the difficult but necessary decision to sell the property and secure appropriate senior housing. When Jackson took the stand, he continued this narrative, his expression a practiced mask of filial concern. "My mother has always been stubborn about the farm," he testified. "After her surgery, her doctors made it clear she wouldn't be able to handle the physical demands anymore. I was worried she'd hurt herself trying." "And the proceeds from the sale?" Sandra asked during cross-examination. "We set aside $200,000 for her future care," Jackson replied, as if this were perfectly reasonable. "And the remaining $650,000, Jackson shifted uncomfortably. "Some went to paying off our debts, some for necessary purchases. Like a first-class honeymoon to the Bahamas," Sandra pressed. "Designer clothing, a $60,000 watch. Were these necessary purchases for your mother's care?" Judge Bowers leaned forward. "Mr. McIntyre, are you saying you spent the proceeds from the sale of your mother's property, which you claim to have sold for her benefit, on luxury items for yourself and your wife?" Jackson's confidence visibly wavered. "We deserved some compensation for taking care of my mother's affairs, and the farm was going to be my inheritance eventually anyway." Natalie took the stand next, her testimony cold and calculating. Opal was never going to be able to manage that farm again. We did her a favor. She should be grateful we're taking care of her future instead of leaving her to struggle alone. When my turn came, I felt surprisingly calm. I told my story simply and directly. My family's history with the farm. The limited power of attorney intended only for operational decisions during my recovery. My explicit instructions that the property not be sold. My shock upon discovering not only the sale, but the rapid dissipation of the proceeds. Mrs. McIntyre, the judge asked, did you ever express to your son that you wished to sell the farm or move to a senior living facility? Never, Your Honor. That farm is my home. My husband is buried there. My children grew up there. I intended to live out my days there, making whatever accommodations were necessary for my changing abilities. Amanda testified next, describing my mental clarity during hospitalization and my consistent, expressed desire to return to the farm. Dr. Levinson confirmed that while he had recommended modifying certain farm activities, he had never suggested I couldn't live independently or needed to sell my property. Franklin Weber's testimony about the limited scope of the power of attorney was particularly damning. Mrs. McIntyre was explicit that this document was solely for maintaining the farm in her absence, not making major changes, and certainly not selling it. I explained this clearly to both Mrs. McIntyre and her son. As the evidence mounted, Jackson's expression shifted from confidence to concern. During a brief recess, I overheard him arguing with Natalie in the hallway. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You said it would be simple, that she wouldn't fight back. How was I supposed to know she'd get a lawyer? She's never stood up to me before." Their relationship was already fracturing under pressure. I felt a strange detachment watching them, as if observing strangers rather than my own family. When court reconvened, Judge Bowers didn't mince words. Based on the evidence presented, I find that Jackson McIntyre exceeded his authority under the limited power of attorney and breached his fiduciary duty to his mother. The sale of McIntyre Farm, while legally binding due to the protection of innocent third-party purchasers, was the result of an unauthorized and fraudulent use of limited power of attorney. She ordered Jackson to return all remaining funds from the sale immediately, plus pay additional damages for emotional distress and unauthorized use of the power of attorney. His assets would remain frozen until full accounting and restitution were made. She also referred the case to the district attorney for potential criminal charges of elder financial abuse. "Mrs. McIntyre, I'm sorry the court cannot restore your property to you," Judge Bowers said directly to me, "but I hope this judgment provides some measure of justice." As we left the courtroom, Jackson approached Natalie, noticeably absent. His face showed the first genuine remorse I'd seen since this ordeal began. "Mom," he began, voice cracking, "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything," I replied, the victory feeling hollow rather than triumphant. "Your actions have said everything already." He reached for my arm, but I pulled away. "I was trying to help you. It just got out of hand. You sold my home, Jackson. You stole my legacy. That wasn't help. That was betrayal." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Perhaps someday those words would mean something to me. But not that day. That day, I walked away from my son, unsure if our relationship could ever be repaired, but certain that I had reclaimed my voice, my power, and my dignity. The farm might be gone, but I was not defeated. 6 months after the court ruling, I stood on the porch of my new home, a modest 3-acre property just outside Billings. The house was smaller than my farmhouse, but solid and welcoming, with a wraparound porch, perfect for morning coffee. The land included a substantial garden area, small apple orchard, and enough space for the few chickens and goats I'd decided to keep. It wasn't McIntyre Farm. Nothing could replace what I'd lost, but it was mine, purchased with the recovered funds and damages from the lawsuit. A new beginning at 67. The first weeks after the court decision had been difficult. Jackson and Natalie's assets remained frozen, while forensic accountants traced the farm proceeds. Many items had already been spent on the honeymoon, which was abruptly cut short when the court order arrived. The luxury watches, designer clothes, and other extravagances were sold to help restore my funds. Their apartment lease was terminated when they could no longer afford the rent. The final accounting recovered about $500,000 of the original sale price. The rest was gone, dissipated on expenses that couldn't be reclaimed. With the additional damages awarded by the court, I had enough to purchase this smaller property and maintain a comfortable retirement fund. Natalie filed for divorce within weeks of the judgment, unwilling to weather the financial and social consequences of their actions. Jackson moved into a small apartment and took a second job to begin paying the remaining restitution ordered by the court. The district attorney ultimately decided not to pursue criminal charges given Jackson's cooperation with financial recovery and lack of prior offenses. As for me, I began the process of rebuilding not just a home, but a life. Barbara helped me furnish the new house, accompanying me to estate sales and thrift stores to find pieces with character. Not the same as my family heirlooms, but in time, they became meaningful in their own way. I planted a small memorial garden for Thomas in the backyard, with his favorite roses and a simple stone bench. Sometimes I sat there in the evenings, telling him about my day, about the changes in my life, about my journey toward forgiveness, both of Jackson and myself. I hadn't been able to protect our home, but I was finding a way forward. The Petersons kept their word about caring for the farm. They invited me to visit several times, an experience that was both painful and healing. Seeing children running through the orchard again, the barn freshly painted, the fields productive. Sarah even asked for my advice on managing the apple varieties, honoring the knowledge I'd accumulated over decades. "You're welcome anytime," she told me sincerely. "This will always be McIntyre Farm in spirit." I resumed selling at the farmer's market, my table smaller, but still featuring homemade jams and fresh eggs. The community welcomed me back with open arms, many expressing outrage at what had happened and offering support in various ways. A local carpenter built me raised garden beds to make gardening easier on my back. Neighbors helped set up irrigation systems that required less physical labor. My experience led me to connect with other seniors facing similar situations. I began speaking at community centers about financial protection and recognizing signs of exploitation. The local area agency on aging asked me to join their advisory board, using my firsthand experience to help shape elder protection policies. Jackson made halting attempts at reconciliation. Cards at first, then occasional phone calls. I wasn't ready for direct contact, yet the wound still too fresh. But I didn't reject his efforts outright. Time would tell if genuine change was possible. "You don't have to forgive him," Barbara said one afternoon as we planted tulip bulbs along my new front walkway. "Some things are unforgivable." "I'm not doing it for him," I replied, pressing soil over a bulb. "Holding on to anger takes energy I'd rather use for living." The journey toward forgiveness wasn't linear or easy. Some days, the loss felt as fresh as the day I'd seen strangers in my home. Other days, I could acknowledge that in forcing me to start over, Jackson had inadvertently pushed me toward new connections and purpose I might never have found otherwise. Amanda, the nurse who had testified on my behalf, became a dear friend. At 62, she understood the challenges of aging without condescension. We took a pottery class together at the community college, laughing at our misshapen attempts and celebrating small successes. Lisa Chen, the reporter who had covered my story, invited me to speak on her podcast about elder issues. That led to connections with advocacy groups fighting for stronger protections against financial exploitation. My painful experience was helping others avoid similar fates, giving meaning to what had happened. As the seasons changed, my new little farm took shape. The apple saplings sent out new growth. The garden produced its first harvest. Chickens scratched in the yard, and goats bleated for treats when they saw me coming. Different from before, but good in its own way. One spring morning, almost a year after the court decision, I received a letter from Jackson. Not a card with a generic apology, but a multi-page, handwritten letter detailing his remorse, his therapy journey, his understanding of the harm he had caused. He asked nothing of me, not forgiveness or reconciliation, just that I know he recognized the depth of his betrayal. I read it several times before placing it in a drawer, neither rejecting nor embracing it, giving myself permission to process at my own pace. Healing, like farming, couldn't be rushed. It followed its own natural rhythm. On the anniversary of Thomas's death, I visited his memorial garden and realized something important. Home wasn't just a piece of land or a structure. It wasn't even solely about memories or history. Home was the courage to plant new seeds after devastation, the resilience to start over when everything familiar was lost, the wisdom to carry forward what mattered while releasing what didn't serve anymore. I had lost my family farm, but found a different kind of legacy in the process. One built on standing up for myself, on creating community, on using my experience to help others. Jackson's betrayal had taken much from me, but it hadn't taken everything. The most important parts, the strength, the determination, the capacity for growth and change, those remained intact, even enhanced by the trial I'd endured. As I watch the sunset from my new porch, I think about what I've learned through this journey. That trust, once broken, is difficult, but not impossible to rebuild. That starting over is terrifying, but also liberating. That we are never too old to stand up for ourselves or to create something new. That home is wherever we choose to nurture growth in the soil and in ourselves. I'm curious about your thoughts on family betrayal and healing. Have you ever had to start over after losing something important? How did you find the strength to rebuild? Please share your stories in the comments. And if this journey resonated with you, subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and renewal. Remember that no matter your age or circumstances, you always deserve respect and dignity. Thank you for walking this path with me today, and may you find peace in your own journey forward.